Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, whenever and wherever you're watching this live training. And obviously, I can see that we're live, so I'm going to go straight into today's. Come out of that. And obviously, as I mentioned in the title of the video, or the training, should I say, is what we're going to touch upon today is feeling slash thinking, and do I have enough time in the day to do X? Obviously, I'm going to talk you through the thinking versus the feeling and what you need to know, uh, why you have that feeling of always putting yourself on your knees last, have this feeling of there's an opportune time when you obviously do this better, and then last but not least, which I obviously put first in the description, is once you've completed X, you will have more time on a day-to-day basis to invest in yourself. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen. Share my screen. Bosh, bosh, bosh. I'll try not to do like I did last week. For those that saw it, so let me present. There we go. So I'm assuming everybody can see my screen. Obviously, as usual, if you're watching on the live, obviously do come and say hello and put live. And obviously, if you're watching at a later date, don't forget to put replay. Obviously, I've touched upon what we're going to discuss today, but I'll reiterate it again. Obviously, if you put yourself, or always put yourself on your knees last, obviously this obviously don't look at that as a grammar, not the grammar police. That's a mistake. Once you've completed it, you have more time to do bases and invest yourself. Obviously, this is all a mindset. So, be it, I've got a lot of notes next to me. Obviously, the microphone takes up a lot of space, but 80% of your actions are 80% psychology, and obviously the rest is obviously action. It's based on rituals, etc. But I'll go into that in a little bit detail later on. But if we backtrack from a little bit of what's the difference between somebody that is a thinker and somebody that's a feeler, and there is a third category to this as well, but obviously it's not needed in today's live training. If you want to know that, obviously let me know by what are signs. Put signs in the comments if you want to know what the third one is. When it comes to either being a thinker or a feeler, and obviously there's a third person when it comes to that. My train of thought's not working today. When it comes to people's behaviors, obviously the primary difference between a thinking judgment and a feeling judgment is the nature in which you evaluate that said criteria. Obviously, thinkers are very logical. Can be. It's all about numbers, statistics, facts. Where on the other hand, obviously, feelers consider, obviously, the description, obviously, on the slide is taste and feelings, both on their own and of others, obviously, to make the decision. So obviously, it's very much, how would I describe this? Somebody that is a thinker is not easily swayed on their decisions. They might take other people's opinions as critique or criticism to be able to make a decision, because it's obviously two heads are better than one. Where on the other hand, obviously a feeler would be swayed by an opinion or somebody's perspective on that. I've said to use the example of, obviously, and this has happened on numerous occasions when people have spoken to me, of their family make a judgment of them of you're not eating my food but I think you look overweight. Obviously, from a feeling perspective, it's not helpful, because on one hand, obviously, if you don't eat the food, they'll criticize you for that, and on the other hand, obviously, they're criticizing you for being on the larger side, so you can't win. So the differences being, if we go into a greater detail of, obviously, as I mentioned, obviously very logical, more so than emotional. Obviously, feelers, just the word in itself is more caring. I'm generalizing a little bit, but obviously focuses on the truth, quick to find inconsistencies, obviously flaws, curious, so they always wanted to learn, critical of new ideas. Okay, that makes sense. Forgetful, so be it. This is probably where journaling, writing things down, is imperative if you will fall into that category of a thinker, of, because of, you won't be able to see my hands, but say you had success with a diet or training and you got to your goal, and then obviously, heaven forbid, you fall off the bandwagon and you put on another not another £10. You add the £10 that you lost. Obviously, if you're forgetful, you forget how you were successful in the first place, and obviously we would catastrophize and go from there. So obviously, that is something I didn't know, so that makes more sense. I fall somewhere in between the two, between a thinker and a feeler. Obviously, avoid small talk. Obviously, feelers, warm and compassionate, as I said before, with being caring. They try to avoid conflict. Obviously, you could say, on the other hand, the thinker, if they trying to find inconsistencies, they're trying to find conflict. Natural peacemakers, morally strong, seek conscious consensus, not consciousness from others. So obviously, they're trying to be trying to find inner peace to a certain extent, and focused on relationships. So if we use me, you can kind of see where it's very difficult, because I used this a couple months ago with another coach to be able to say why I was kind of logical, but I used kind of a wartime example of hunkering down in a bunker. Thus, I can go on the defensive, and I can go on the offensive. But obviously, the moral of the story is trying to find some sort of equilibrium. We break that down into a step even further. Thoughts versus feelings, which is all this live is all about. Is thoughts come down to perceptions, ideas, opinions produced by our own thinking or occurring suddenly in the mind. It all, to a certain extent, of, if we go into the realms of mental health, it would be construed by our emotions. If I use, obviously, what's going on in present day 2022, if you're watching this in the future, obviously we're talking about recessions, increases in fuel, energy prices going through the roof. That's not a thought. That's an emotional reaction to, obviously, things that we don't have control of, which I'm going to go into a little bit later. Obviously, feelings are our emotions or our reactions to a physical or mental sensation. So be it's more so, if we broke down the emotion to a physiological one, a critical one, what I'm going to call it, is obviously the thinking, and what is the one in between? Obviously, how we react. So our body is, if we look at it in the simplest terms, between excitement and anxiousness, physiologically is no difference. The body's going to do exactly the same thing, but it's how our feelings and emotions understand that chain of reaction in the physiology, physiological state that we find ourselves, then that obviously makes how we act, behave, create habits, rituals, etc. And then obviously we're in that thought process of, we go down the realms of depression, anxiety, etc. further down the chain. It comes back to, if I come back to the thought aspect of our ideas, our perceptions, or our opinions is how we see the world. Obviously, it's going to differentiate between me talking to you today and how you interpret it. Obviously, from a feeling perspective, the reactions to emotions and sensations. So, this is something that I had one of my clients do. It is called grounding, but if you Google it, you would use your senses to reestablish a, how would I describe this? Put you into the present. If I was to use terminology to do with psychology and cognitive behavior and things like that, is to do, oh gosh, I can't remember how to do it. Is 5 things that you see, 4 things that you hear, 2 things that you smell, and then I can't remember what, and then 1 thing that you taste. And obviously that is a sensation to be able to, it will obviously give an emotional feeling and reaction towards that. So obviously that's going to even step further to that. Let me know in the comments if this is making sense. Obviously if you need me to slow down gosh, my brain's not working at all today, to slow down and to break things down even further, let me know in the comments, or you need me to slow down, so you are understanding what I'm saying. I can't remember what I was looking for then. I'll bring up the thing. So okay, there's no comments just yet. I'll do that just so I can do it in real time. Obviously, coming back to the thoughts, we experience thoughts later as we grow up and gain more experience of it. Let me turn myself down because I don't want to hear myself. Obviously, this is superseded to a certain extent when we get to adolescence. Obviously, we're not as easily skewed as children because we've got our dreams and our aspirations that we want to accomplish, and then obviously, be it, I'm going to say, the larger world says obviously that's not really a realistic goal, etc., etc. It could be a teacher, it could be a parent, it could be whoever, and then obviously we experience feelings first. So it's a necessary evil of, we don't generally speaking look to contextualize and to look at an experience in a logical or rational sense, because obviously we respond towards how we react from an emotional state of, if it obviously happiness, everything's smooth, angry, frustrated, sad, obviously we're gonna then enact obviously that there and after, which I'll explain at the end of this live, so you can visualize what I'm talking about and make a little bit more sense. I would disagree on the fourth bit of, obviously the thoughts can be complex and feelings tend to be simple. I would probably reverse that, but that's just the way I would look at it, because your thoughts aren't complex. They're this idea that comes into your head, and obviously the example I've used as a result of, what's Gary's surname, but he used the example of a bird flying in to land on a branch and then flying away in just the same fashion. That's obviously thoughts and feelings interlinked, because obviously it would be viewing a negative emotion or feeling, landing, coming in, leaving it alone and letting it fly away. Obviously that is not simple, because it's obviously more complex than that, because you don't want you have this yucky feeling of you don't want a negative feeling to come in the first place. So the aspect where it says obviously thoughts are complex and not, because obviously it would supersede the feeling, because if you laser focused in on the feeling and the emotion, obviously it would then become complex, because every time you want to dispel that thought, behavior, etc., you can't, because you focus in on it, you can't let it go. So I would flip the two the other way around. We break it a step further in terms of, so you can see how they interlink. Good, I didn't leak this time. Obviously, if we go from the thought process first, so I've got at the very top of, these are just examples, and obviously I'm going to bring up this website in a minute. Thoughts: nobody likes me, I always mess things up. Obviously you can see that if we go to normal sense, if we go to feeling: sad, self-conscious, anxious. Obviously then the reaction, the physiological one, the body could potentially tense up, palpitations, so increase in heart rate, and extreme cases, obviously no energy, because obviously you've got you so anxious that obviously you're burning the energy that you've got to work to focus in on obviously what's going on internally. And obviously the knock-on effect is obviously the behavior, withdraw from others, stop doing the things you enjoy. Obviously we're starting to go down the realms of anxiety, depression, and mental illness and mental health, and when that's happening, because, and then obviously you can see it is a negative loop, because obviously then it feeds into and reestablishes that inner core belief. And that's the diagram adapted from Westbrook, Kennerly, and Kirk. We go a step further from that, so it goes into the obviously what the group is all about: health and fitness. Thoughts, feelings, and desires continue to interact and produce behaviors as a result of that interaction. So they obviously fuel each other, and obviously make, if you were to use a devil versus an angel example, you're feeding obviously the devil, or the bad thing in that instance, as opposed to obviously taking away from the good, or the one that you would obviously want to be able to promote. To understand this, consider an example. Obviously don't look to the previous page, because these two don't relate. About eating habits. Suppose you feel dissatisfied with your diet, and I'm going to use the word loosely, diet, in terms of fads, not nutrition. You want to improve your diet because you think that by doing so you will improve your health. This is obviously why psychology is and behaviors and learning about habits is more important than losing weight, because obviously you need to have a better understanding of why you got to that place in the first place, and obviously learning to be aware of obviously your own misgivings and mistakes along that way. So obviously thinking relates to doing. However, if I use Tony Robbins, of if you're in like a perfect state and you get after things, this is obviously a good time to do actions, because you're able to look at the logic, look at the reasoning behind why you're doing it, and even if there's any blemishes or anything of fear that could come about, you dismiss it, because obviously you see the end goal or end result, so you'll do it anyway. Versus obviously playing to fears, playing to your thinking, obviously going to your feelings, and then obviously do I really want it? And then either you go down the route of you do it half-ass, and then obviously it didn't work out. So I big up that story of I tried it anyway, but it didn't work out. Or you go in towards, and I can't read my notes, which is not great. You go into the story of, I don't want to use this, but of its kind of scarcity, of it's too expensive, I can't access it, and any little hurdle that you can put in front of it to make sure that it doesn't happen anyway. So those are two ways in thinking that obviously can wander in that. But obviously, if we go back into it, and I'm going to digress, and I'm going to put that alone, so it's not so negative, and we don't focus on that. You can see from a physiological state after, well, say about 3 weeks to a month for you, would be able to see any lasting results. So everybody else would notice it a lot quicker because obviously they're not living it day to day. You now feel satisfied that the diet is working. You think the diet is improving your health. You therefore want to continue with this diet. I'm not going to say the new diet. This new, I'm going to use lifestyle because obviously this supersedes that. But then after a few more weeks, you think, I don't want to eat any more salads and tasteless foods. This is what's wrong with obviously fad diets in the first place. It's too restrictive. And then obviously the stuff that you're not allowed to have, you want even more. I can't keep this up for the rest of my life. There must be a diet available that is not boring. You therefore act on that thinking. So the doing, from the other aspect, the other sense. Again, you consider different diet possibilities, finally deciding upon a new diet. The process begins all over again, with thoughts, feelings, desires, and continually shaping behaviors. So obviously, one is obviously you can see as positive, because you can see the reward in what you're doing, because you can see the results. And then obviously on the other hand, the other one is I don't want to be eating the same mundane food over and over again. Tasteless, boring. I can't see that doing this for the rest of my life. Thus, I wanted to try something new. But the problem with that is obviously a commitment issue, consistency, and obviously you're not looking at it from a psychological perspective or logical sense in terms of why did you want to go on the diet in the first place. We go a step deeper again of, obviously I've talked about core beliefs before, of it's shaped by how you see the future, how others have impacted on your beliefs, and then obviously how you bring it to the table as it accounts to yourself. So obviously your behaviors, your feelings and thoughts have a playing into that. Obviously I'm not going to go into too much detail before because I've obviously covered that off. If you'd like me to send you that piece of training, let me know with core beliefs in the comments, and obviously I can either tag you in the video or I can send it to you, whichever is better for you. So we break it down so you can kind of see it from, this is taken from chiropractors, so it's a little bit more understandable from a physical sense more so than a psychological sense. Okay, don't know why it's telling me I'm live when I've been live for ages. Obviously, all the physiological emotions, feelings, thinkings are internal, and obviously as a direct result is your behavior, and I'm assuming that's supposed to say performance, not performance. That's because as far as I'm concerned, that's not a word. But obviously you can see that your feelings and thinking are interchangeable, and you probably could put emotions in there as well. To obviously, it's internalized, then as a direct result of, depending on which fork you take, is going to have a positive outcome or a negative one, if we look at it just like the simplicity of it, of being able to show that example. As I mentioned before, of showing you like a visual one of, this is taken from a kid's perspective, of the situation is them being scared of giving a class presentation. This is actually really happened. Obviously, it was a elementary or primary school student. It was for me, when I was a teaching assistant, this was a secondary or high school student coming up with the same argument as why they couldn't do a presentation for a grade. Obviously, the one example is to stay at home, don't give the presentation. The thought is, I'm glad I didn't give the presentation. I would have done poorly and been embarrassed. Obviously, the future of that, you can never give a class presentation because you're always too scared. And obviously, this is external to a certain extent, because the fear that the person has is a judgment of themselves and how it's going to be related to from others' perspective. If they're embarrassed, are people going to poke fun at it? Are they going to laugh at me, etc.? But if I use the story of mine, that particular student or pupil only had to present in front of 3 teachers, and they didn't want to do it because they didn't feel comfortable to be able to present it. And obviously, the moral of the story, they failed the class, or they failed that particular part of the subject. And what I kind of gave them an out was because of, and this is only about 3-4 years ago, they would be comfortable to use Snapchat and social media to be able to share things that I sure as hell wouldn't be comfortable with sharing with people. Obviously, people they know, but I used the scenario of, why couldn't you then do something like this, or to film it on your cell phone or your mobile phone, and then obviously give it to the teacher, and then they critique it, etc., etc., etc. Obviously, they didn't want to do that either, but I gave them somewhere in between these two to be able to do well. And obviously, nobody, to a certain extent, well, maybe the really extroverted people that like attention would be very good at public speaking, but for the majority, most people aren't, and that includes myself. The other possible action that person could have taken, obviously in this scenario, not the real life scenario, is to give the presentation anyway. At the beginning, they might feel scared, but once they get through it, nothing bad happened, which is obviously normally the case. The future outcome of that is, obviously, after giving a few presentations, you don't feel scared anymore. So the more that you do something, obviously you gain more and more confidence from doing it, and you see the benefit in it as it, and obviously you're not fearful of what the outcome might be. Okay, so let me come out of the stop sharing for this bit and share. Don't do that. Here, I want to come out of. Nope. Bear with me. I did this last week and no problems. How will it come out? There we go. Got there in the end. Obviously, if we go back to the screen with. I'll, I'll come down so you know what I'm talking about. So to this diagram, we go up. Obviously, our feelings are connected to our emotions, which obviously people would know. There is an automated response if you go physiologically of flight or flight response, and obviously in recent science, obviously there's an aspect of freeze. Some people will freeze because they just don't know how to deal with the situation. Obviously, most would know fight or flight. Obviously, it's a survival mechanism for us to come back another day. Obviously, cognitive therapy, behavioral therapy, so CBT, is based on our thoughts, feelings become our behaviors, and identifies it as a cycle, as I mentioned, obviously, at the very beginning of today's live, and it's on a spiral or cylindrical sense of, and it can obviously go forward and backwards. CBT looks to disrupt this cycle. It helps you to recognize when thoughts are negative and untrue. Have I done CBT? I've done a form of CBT years ago. And obviously it shows you how to turn negative thinking into balanced thinking before it sends you down the road of feelings and a negative behavior. So we go into the aspect of mental health. Most might assume that depression is a feeling disorder. It's not. You feel sad and bad, and I convince you that your problem is too much of you feeling. But in many ways, depression is actually a thinking disorder. You can't let go of that particular thought that's come in. You might feel sad, bad, because your thoughts have become very negative about yourself and the world, full of doom and gloom and even destruction. We simply can't be depressed if we have positive thoughts running through our head about ourselves, the world, and our relationship with others. Obviously, people would know that. Anxiety is of course a clear winner when it comes to thinking disorders. With anxiety, our thoughts race, become increasingly illogic. This leads to feelings of fear and panic. Obviously, it then goes down the realms of depression, because obviously you can't let go of it. So it's like a vicious loop. But sometimes it really is feeling that are the problem. Some people have no control of their emotions. Obviously, that's some people. Tony Robbins would not agree with that. Their feelings vary widely in a way that there is overwhelming for them and those around them. This is called emotional dysregulation. So it's the main symptom is borderline personality disorder or bipolar. So we don't need to go into that much more. Close that one. Thoughts in cognitive. So you can see that what we think and do affects the way that we feel. It's very much a cause and effect and action to reaction. So if you looked at it more than these being 4 boxes as a circle of cause, effect, action, reaction, you can actually that's not the word, not re. You can make this circle go the opposite way of being very what is the word I want to use today? Reverse engineering to go from result instead of reaction, action, how does that affect, and then obviously the beginning. So say for example you wanted to lose, I'm going to use £10 or more and implement or put into place any weights or goal that you have. The action you need to establish to be able to obviously make that happen is obviously changing the way that you eat, change the way that you are mobile, change the way that you I don't want to go overwhelmed, sleep to a certain extent, think, because that's what we talked about today, the effect of the change in behavior and habits is obviously it's going to create inner conflict at the beginning, because obviously you are one person now, and obviously you are trying to create the person you want to be in the future. So there's going to be an inner turmoil with that, and obviously this is easier when everything is in alignment, because it's pretty easy to tick the dots as, okay, I do this, I do this, I do this, I do oh yeah, it's working. I need to go into the beginning, and etc. And then obviously the cause of changing the habits and behaviors is obviously you change your inner core belief. Obviously I've talked about this and I said I wouldn't go into detail, but I've gone into a little bit. So you can reverse engineer that as well to be able to get a result. So obviously an event, a scenario, or an outcome would play into emotions. A friend walks past you on the street without saying hello. I sure as hell wouldn't be worried or upset. I'd be very angry. I would be okay, got to take everybody to take into with a pinch of salt of potentially that person hasn't seen you. They've got a lot on their plate. They've got a lot on their mind. They just didn't see you. So I think when you do take into play, you can see that I've obviously done some of this work, because I wouldn't go to those extremes of most of the time. I would maybe look to be in their shoes a little bit as, okay, it's not the end of the world that they didn't see me and say hello. Interpreting both thinking and feeling now obviously was very important. The negative, obviously, you can see from the one above, is I must have done something wrong for him or her to be upset with me. She must not have seen me. She looks like she has a lot on her mind. Obviously, I've given you the second scenario before I've read that. The feeling, emotional and body sensation was the first one: anxious, tension, nausea, and obviously the other one is I've got more concern for the other person as opposed to myself. This I've talked about a little bit. Obviously the excitement versus the nervousness. Obviously from a promotional perspective. Finally my talent has been rewarded, excited and happy. Obviously and the other one is they will find out I'm a fraud and that I can't do my job. That is imposter syndrome, because to a certain extent everybody's going to be out of their depth when it's something new, because they've not done it before, they've not got the practice, and obviously that's going a step further and catastrophizing, because what if they find out if I'm a fraud? You've got promoted because you're good at something. So why go to a sense of fear straight off the bat? You can see that's a little bit illogical. Obviously, we come to biased thinking, and why are we biased thinkers? Let me get that. A lot of people have obviously been open about this. I term it obviously 0 to 100, so all or nothing thinking. Thinking is extreme. For example, something is either 100% good or 100% bad. The one when it comes to health and fitness is either I'm 100% in or I'm 100% not. Which is a narrative that you're telling yourself to a certain extent, to be able to rationalize it in your own brain to, oh, this is why I'm doing it. Oh, it's either 100% commitment or I don't do it at all. And obviously I've explained to people in the past that this is either perfectionism or procrastination, and the two intermerge. Of, if it's got to be 100% perfect, I can't do it unless it's that. Obviously, it never gets done. Or, well, sorry, let me backtrack. If it's not 100% perfect, it doesn't get done. Obviously, that's procrastination, because I pump the brakes and leave it on the shelf so nobody gets to see it. So this is something that I've done in the past, to the point that my coach actually did the front cover, and this is obviously the Self Mastery ebook that people have got access to. I did that because the cover needs to be perfect before it gets released. Not test it and see what people think of it, and then obviously go back to the drawing board, which I'm doing at the moment. I'm looking to probably do a 2.0 version or a better version of it to build on what I've learned and what I've done from speaking to other people. Thus, it obviously improves the book. Obviously, we've talked about catastrophizing, jumping to the worst possible conclusion of, okay, am I gonna be caught out because I'm a fraud? Is catastrophizing, because it's you don't feel that you're good enough for that particular job. You don't feel that you deserve or warrant a promotion in that case, or you don't deserve that you deserve to have the increase in money. You don't deserve to have that figure. You don't deserve to be able to wear those sorts of clothing. You can see where I'm going with this, in terms of you say you don't deserve it. So there's almost like a self-loathing, or there's no self-love apparent in the way that in which you're thinking. Obviously, the next one is overgeneralization, seeing a pattern based on a single event. This is obviously what people will use to diminish some responsibility. Of, if I generalize it and say everybody does it, it diminishes it diminishes my own responsibility to my problems. Because if I say we or they, obviously I'm including it in the argument, as opposed to taking responsibility of the you or the I, or especially the I, because I have the problem, thus I need to do something about it. Mental filter, only paying attention to certain type of evidence. That doesn't count. So be it, obviously, I'm not going to go into political things or religious stuff. This obviously plays massively into that. Disqualifying the positives, discounting positive information or twisting a positive into a negative. This is human behavior 101. Obviously, we will seek out, I'm not going to say flaws, we're going to seek out any minute frailty or negative that we can to, give fuel or ammunition to our beliefs. So the example I will use of exercise, if I did all my training on a particular day, but one particular exercise didn't go to plan, and I focused on that, obviously that is disqualifying the positive. It was a good overall training session, but that exercise was crap. Oh, that exercise could have gone better. You can see what the kind of language that I'm using. I'm focusing in extremely into that thinking. Jumping to conclusions, mind reading and predicting the future. Obviously, you can't predict the future. It's almost like Wolf of Wall Street, just to an extent. That proportion of society says they can read the future. It's not true. And I think the movie obviously made that to the fore that even they're guessing a little bit. Low frustration tolerance. Saying things like, "This is too difficult. This is unbearable. I can't stand it." You can see that obviously that can quickly get out of control. Just that way of thinking. Minimalization, discounting the importance of something. So that would go hand in hand. How would you use minimalization? Not sweating the small stuff. Is not enjoying the process. Not. Uh, you'd see this probably more to do in health and fitness because people kind of obsessed with the result. Oh, I need to look like this. I need to happen for it to happen now. And obviously, because we live in kind of a microwave society, everything needs to happen to now. And obviously, it discounts the importance of you got to do the basics right over and over again. It's boring, it's monotonous, but obviously that's what wins at the end of the day. It's, as Tony Robbins would say, is progress is happiness. He talks about structure. These are all minimizations or microisms. Microism not a word, but there's small things that make up a big whole. Emotional reasoning, assuming that because we feel a certain way, our hunch must be true. This goes back to our inner belief of we are trying to essentially prove that story to be true. So our emotions will come in sync with that. Our way of thinking will come in sync to that. Our physiology will come into that. Our behaviors and our habits will all align to that emotional reasoning, because ultimately we are creatures of comfort. We want things easy. So if I can be able to do something that isn't going to cause harm or distress, I'm going to seek that out. So that's our subconscious. However, if that's not what you want out in life, and this is taken from Jim Rome, if you want something in life, if you want something in life to change, you have to change. And it's as simple as that. Is you as the vessel or the soul have to, and I'm not going to go too spiritual into this, you have to change, because the person you are now cannot become the person you need to be. The person you are at present cannot step into the shoes of the person you want to become. It's not possible. You have to be always willing to progress, to grow. And obviously the flip side of that is obviously when you stop learning, you obviously, Tony Robbins talks about morbid, but you die inside. You regress. You stagnate. You become uh, too content, and obviously you're not moving. Obviously the world around you is still moving. That was not really relevant. The demands, labeling. Obviously, assigning labels to ourselves or others. You can tell this is a British one, maybe. I'm rubbish. I'm crap. I'm going to use I'm shit. Of that is a, how would I describe this? Because I did this not too long, about a week ago, and I used the term even more extreme than that. I'm a failure. And obviously that's a label, and I kind of went, no, James, you're not a failure. The circumstances of what you've been doing has made it to be a failure. You and that circumstance are two different things. So obviously I do come unstuck with self-sabotage from time to time, but I'm aware what I said. So I obviously kind of went, no, we're not going to reinforce an inner belief that I don't agree with, because, okay, failure and failing and fear of failing is the same thing, but I didn't want to label myself that. So obviously, and then lastly, impersonalization, taking too much or too little responsibility. Uh, Obviously, the taking too little responsibility would go back to which one is it? Yeah, the mental filter would be not taking responsibility, and obviously taking too much responsibility would be towards putting untowards pressure on yourself to be a success, where um, you might not take into account, external factors such as work stress, family stress, other things that you might not would be available, and you're taking too much on your shoulders. So they're two different things in terms of this is my fault. Yeah, that's it for that one. So what I want people to take away from the live training today, and I don't want to take up too much time because got about 9 minutes remaining of the live, is to look at it in two fashions of, you could put it as thinking or feeling or both, because it's looking at what you can control versus what you can't control. And obviously I've done a training on this long time ago, so if you haven't seen that, put obviously a circle of control in the comments, and I can send you that training by all means, because obviously we look to want to control every aspect of life, every facet of it, and we don't want to relinquish control of financial financial implications, health, well-being, etc., because we want to take the responsibility on our own shoulders. But this is where you need to take a step back, and obviously Tony Robbins looks to use focus. So focus equals power. So you can see from a mental perspective, where you focus in on things that are not going well, that's not serving you. That's not making you thrive. That's obviously destructive and catastrophic. Versus, obviously, if you focus on what you can control, so this is the aspect of obviously learning. So we talked about growth, progression, obviously happiness. You're looking to evolve. I think there's a good story along this is, obviously I've been on both ends of the spectrum of coming out of, when did I think about this? Probably college, university, as a postgrad student. Oh, I've done enough learning. I can't. I know it all, and I would have been 2013, 27, 28 years old. Oh, I know it all. I know it all. That's almost 10 years ago now, which is not a long time ago for some people. I don't. I don't know anything in comparative life compared to somebody that's in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. I've not had enough life experience to know it all. I've not seen everything, and to know everything. So what he means by that is be grateful what you have, reminding yourself, as instead of focusing on the things that you don't have, be grateful for the things that you do have, and then building upon that. So to come back to the earlier point that Jim Rohn talked about, if you want your life to change, you have to change. You've got to evolve. So that could be physically, that could be emotionally, that could be spiritually, that could be psychologically, in terms of like learning, or being able to push yourself out of your comfort zone to be able to be embracing of uncertainty, to kind of go, okay, I can't control the future, but let's go off into the future with excitement of being very much like that kid in the candy store or the sweet store of, or a Charlie and Chocolate Factory is probably the better one. He didn't think he was going to win a ticket to go see Willy Wonka, but his grandfather got bought one ticket and he won. But he was very excited to go, to be able to take his grandfather along for the ride, because he'd worked there previously. And it doesn't matter if you look at the modern day with Johnny Depp, or the older one, of he was very happy to be there just to experience it, whereas the other kids were maybe, it looks at every aspect of human behavior. Those kids, of some were spoiled, some were maybe, if you use big fat German, of maybe a little bit greedy, etc. He's the one that won out in the end, because he did something that he wanted to experience. And obviously the moral of the story is obviously being grateful for that. And I've gone off on a tangent and I've forgotten where I'm going with it. It's also to find a story that's going to empower you to act, versus having a lousy story that I mentioned earlier on, of that things are too expensive, I can't access them, or you get a strategy that you implement but you do it half-assed. So you just can reward that inner belief, or that inner story of, it doesn't work, even though I've tried it. It's trying to reinforce the story that is going to empower you, so it's a sense to thrive and to succeed. Resourcefulness is ultimately ultimate resource. Is being able to pivot, to shift, to kind of, if something goes wrong, to learn from it, not necessarily go, oh, okay, I failed, it doesn't work for me, it will never work, I'm a failure, I hate the way that looked, da 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 da. We catastrophizing straight away. That, what's the point? Would be the end result of that. If you don't have what you want, and I do disagree with this, stop telling yourself a story that you don't have time. This obviously is BS. You haven't committed to what Tony Robbins called burning your boat. So the example that he uses for it, and obviously Chris loves a bit of Tony Robbins, so I might tag him in this because he likes this. But it's a case of, if you're on a desert island, and if you want to succeed and to survive, you set fire to your boat, so you don't have an out. And obviously the point that he makes of that is, by burning your alternative. So say the island is plan A, and the boat and the way out is a plan B. And obviously Tony Robbins says this, Arnold Schwarzenegger says this, of you need to kind of dispel plan B altogether. I don't agree with that to some extent, because obviously we're all got disabilities in here. Plan A always doesn't work out, because we'd be on crutches or in a wheelchair. If plan A worked, or if it didn't, that scenario would become apparent anyway. So the moral of the story is, he says to burn the boat, or you could say burn your bridges, so you don't have an way out. So you have to go all in on plan A to make it a success, because there is no alternative. It's boom or bust. and obviously the way in which it is for successful people is they go in at all cost of it's that or it's nothing. So if I kind of use it as an example myself, is that is why I've got conviction of turning up, the commitment, the relentlessness, because it's obviously for the community. It's not for me. Obviously, I do all right out of it as a result, but I show up for the community. So I've got a passionate. So I don't need to burn a bridge. I've got enough people that need support. It doesn't matter if it is paid or not, or if it's free. It's utilizing to be able to do a service, of being able to. I was asked this just yesterday of, well, why did you come up with the concept of the AMP methods? And I think it was an able-bodied person that asked me, but it's the reason behind it was because of seeing so many amputees, and I'm going to put it on a blanket statement, everybody, limb loss or limb different, not having the resources available to them, which obviously I have a luxury because not only did I coach, but I've got so much experience before that of, for me, it's not very difficult to pivot, but there isn't enough resources out there for you guys and girls, so I made it a mission of mine to be able to fill that void. So that is, in a nutshell, obviously my desert island, because obviously if I don't show up, I do you guys a disservice. So that's enough. That's, I shouldn't laugh. That's enough motivation or kick up the ass to kind of go, yep, James, this isn't working. You need to pivot. You need to readjust, ask questions, keep going, ask people behind the scenes of what their challenges are, what their problems are, what their issues are, and obviously then we're able to serve you even better. So I don't go off on on a tangent too much. Obviously, that's the difference between thinking and feeling. I wanted to gain a greater understanding of, you can essentially change your thinking. You can change how you emotively react to a situation, and it obviously starts with learning. So I do apologize that this has been a little bit impromptu for today, but obviously this is taken from a conversation I've had with somebody behind the scenes of, they felt that they were always putting themselves on the back burner, and obviously they couldn't be able to they had to accomplish something else before they could obviously invest in themselves. Obviously I can obviously what investment looks like to end on it, so people got some bit of clarity, because this is what the end of it, this is what it comes down to. It doesn't have to be a financial transaction when it comes to investment. It's just a case of investing in yourself. So obviously I touched upon that as one of the key points. It could be reading a book, it could be watching something educational on Netflix. As long as you're learning something that you didn't know before, or you could be reading something on the internet, that's investment in yourself, because you're not content with where you are, but you wanna progress. And the last tidbit I want to add before I do sign off is Dean. I'm gonna pronounce his last name wrong, but Dean Graziosi, and he does work periodically with Tony Robbins. He said the number one thing you can do going forward and in the future is investing into yourself. So that doesn't matter if it. I could probably show you on camera the number of books that I've purchased. Of, okay, they might not be completed, but there's an aspect within a book that I want to know about, as in, like, as a particular chapter sounds, oh, I want to know more about that, and then go from there. So it's not being a case of, we did touch upon all the mental attributes of, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. It can be that little by little approach, and you don't necessarily have to burn your bridge or burn the boat to begin with. It just a case of it's there, but you don't have to jump in it. So I hope you've enjoyed this video today. I do apologize that it's overrun by an extra 5 minutes. If you've got any questions or you'd like to accelerate your own health and fitness, let me know by messaging me fitness or commenting fitness on this video, and obviously we're going to have a chat. There's no obligations to buy. Obviously there's a post like that obviously says that. Then there's a coaching call. Few people have obviously taken that up and have had monumentous breakthroughs. But obviously, hope you enjoy this one today. Hope you enjoy future videos, and look forward to seeing many more of you, especially the one or two that have joined live. I do appreciate you coming on. Have a wonderful day, and speak to you soon. All the best. Take care.